Some of you may become somewhat uncomfortable as parts of this film unfold, but I think if you listen carefully...
Nature has intended
Today,
that
everybody
A healthy, happy sex life is the most wonderful and exciting. We've all experienced curiosity about ourselves and the opposite sex. Who hasn't?
Hello, my lovelies. I'm Megan.
I'm Marcella.
And I'm Colin.
And
welcome to Remedial Sex Ed.
Today we are discussing what is sex and what is virginity, because we have officially finished the basics of sex. We've talked about STIs, we've talked about condoms, we've talked about consent, we've talked about the bare minimum that a public school should be teaching you. But you know what we haven't actually discussed? What is sex?
What is sex? What is a sex?
What is a sex? Now, the definition of sex...
Webster's Dictionary defines.
It's so personal. Like, what your answer to that question is going to be is entirely connected to your personal identity, your background, your experience. Like, how we as a group define sex may not align with how you personally define as sex. The mission of today's episode is for us to discuss it and kind of present new ideas that maybe you, listener, had never considered before. Mm-hmm. And so, on top of that, for today's guest stars, it is really 5 people talking about sex, and what qualifies us all to talk about sex is the fact that we've had it.
Fair. Yeah. Fair, I think.
So, let's start by introducing our 2 guests. We have Zoe. Would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi. My name is Zoe. I'm 21 years old. I am an actor and a writer and a recently self-proclaimed advocate. I co-founded an organization this summer helping reunite families separated at the border. And I have had sex.
Excellent.
The most important
So that foundation, can you tell us who they are and how we could possibly support them? I know the border is on everyone's mind right now.
Yeah. It's called Immigrant Families Together, and there's a website. It's immigrantfamiliestogether.com, and there are places that you can donate on the website. We have like a rapid response fund that goes to people's immediate needs once they're reunited or in the process of being reunited. And social media, Facebook is Immigrant Families Together. Instagram, Twitter are ImFam Together, so IMMFAM Together.
Cool, and we'll link to all that in the show notes for you listeners.
Our other guest host that we have today is Jerry.
Hey.
Hi, Jerry.
Hey, guys.
Would you like to give a quick little intro to yourself?
Tell us about yourself.
Sure. My name's Jerry. I'm 27 years old. I come from Eagle Pass, Texas, which is a little border town of about, I think now it's kind of big. I think when I was young, it used to be like 10,000 people. But grew up with a primarily conservative background, especially from my parents. Then went to school in Austin, and now I'm living here in Long Beach, California.
Yeah.
And I have also had sex.
Great.
Wait, has everybody here except me had sex? I feel set up.
Let's jump into the first question. What is sex? I feel as though this is a question that is first asked at some time in your youth. Mm-hmm. And traditionally, when we get the answer to that question, parents will say, when a man sticks his penis inside of a vagina. Is that the explanation that everyone else had when they first asked the question?
I don't remember. I mean, the first question I asked was like, where did I come from? Mm-hmm. And so the answer to that is, in fact, a man, stuck his penis in a vagina. So that was that answer, and I think then that was I took that to mean that's what sex was. I don't remember like specifically being told it's between a man and a woman, especially because I didn't grow up in an environment where that was necessarily true. Like in the theater community in New York, it was certainly not like even the norm.
Wow, that's interesting. I feel like my answer is very, not opposite, but a much more conservative. To me, sex was always, or at least it was explained to me as like something that is almost not about pleasure. It's about like having sex to have kids, to increase your family and the lineage. And yeah, that's kind of, well, at least I would explain it. Of course, it's between a man and a woman, for that reason that, sex is meant to create a family.
I guess mine is similar to Zoe. The first question I asked wasn't... The first time I ever got this explanation wasn't when I asked what sex was. It's like, where do babies come from? And that does have kind of a strict answer that it comes from P and V. So I don't know if I ever asked my parents like what sex was, I'm trying to picture what I think their response would have been if I had just come out and asked like, well, what do you think sex is? Where do you draw the line between a sex and not a sex? And honestly, I think the answer they would give me now if I were to ask that question would be totally different than the one they would have given me when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I 100% don't think that I've ever asked my parents what sex is. And part of that was growing up in Los Angeles, where from a very young age, people have crushes. People are sexual. Like, I remember boys in my class, I've mentioned this before, grabbing my butt. Like, it was just a much more sexual environment by the time you're 10 years old in California. So it was so much younger that I heard about sex through my friends. And I think the way that I learned about sex was where we would pretend that like we were older and she was a boy and we were like gonna be romantic and it was gonna be this sexual situation, which I like think that's how I learned about sex. And it was from another woman, but it's a boy and he puts a penis inside you.
Huh, so it was like from playing house.
Exactly. I was playing house with a girl and it was still heteronormative.
Let's start out with a simple yes or no question. Does that definition align with how these 5 people think of sex now?
Hell no.
No.
Not now, no. But I would say that definition worked for me until kind of like shockingly recently.
At what age do you think you no longer believed in that?
I can't pinpoint it exactly. I never had to think about it. I never had to adjust my definition of sex and virginity until I started thinking about other people's perspectives. So I don't know, maybe I didn't start readjusting my definition of sex till I was like 25 or 26.
Wow.
Wow.
I think the first time I redefined sex was I was about 16 or 17, and I was a member of the LGBT straight alliance club in high school. And I was part of the alliance, right? So I didn't feel much ownership. I was just there to be supportive. But actually talking to others about their sexual identity and how they experienced romantic interactions with another person, that's when it kind of started clicking with me that definition is pretty flawed. And I would love to hear what Zoe and Jerry have to say on the subject.
I can't pinpoint exactly when it changed for me, but it was pretty early. I mean, I have this memory of when I was a kid, I had this closet that had this is ironic. It's this closet that had a section above the door that was really difficult to get to, so I had to stand on my dresser to get to it, and I had to get something out of it. And I don't know why I had this realization at that moment, but as I was reaching for whatever it was, I guess I realized that, like, I thought of women in the way that people talk about men.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, holy shit. I am a lesbian. I was like nine or 10 probably, maybe 11. But that wasn't necessarily about sex in particular. That was more like feelings. But I mean, it certainly had changed by the time I was 14, because that was when I did lose my virginity to a woman. Or, well, no, she wasn't a woman. We were just, you know.
Teenagers.
Yeah, we got you.
Consenting children.
I don't know, but I kind of just didn't think about it. I was like, this is what I am doing. And I'm just not gonna, like, address the fact that people may disagree. So I'm just not gonna tell them, I guess, for a while.
I also can't really pinpoint when that exact change happened, or I feel like for me it was more gradual. I think for me it was a little bit difficult as well, because I think there was almost this bit of shame coming from my realization that my view of sex is different from what I was taught. So it made it kind of hard and complicated to initially realize that my view of sex is inherently different because of my sexuality. But I'd say maybe, I mean, I agree that it ties into not necessarily your view of sex, but your view of how you are attracted to other people. So I definitely knew that, around the same age, when like 9, 10, maybe 11, that's when I definitely realized, like, oh, okay, God. Now I'm thinking of this one specific moment where, there was that movie with Mel Gibson, What Women Want. And there's like that bathroom scene where he like crosses his legs and he's completely nude, but he crosses his legs so you don't see like the junk or whatever. That's when I was like, oh man, this is sexy. And like, that's so disgusting to think about right now, because we all know how Mel Gibson is now. Oh God, what's wrong with me? No, I was kidding. No, so yeah, that's when I definitely knew that there was like a change in how my parents viewed sexuality and even just affection in general. And then, once I came out at 16, I definitely obviously saw a huge change. But even at that, I feel like my view of sex didn't just stop at like, oh, well, it's not between a man and a woman. It's between a man and a man and a woman and a woman. I think right now I'm realizing sex is it's a lot more of a beautiful, fluid process that, to me, I kind of just see it as like a moment of extreme intimacy between you and one or other partners,
Sure. Marcella, I'm interested because I know you.
Hi.
I know you, girl.
And we've been friends for a long time. Like, how has your definition of sex changed throughout your life?
So, yeah, I was trying to pinpoint it as well. And as somebody who, my sexuality defined me from a very young age, but I didn't come to terms with being a bisexual until I was 16, I think. So all throughout childhood, I had very close friends that I thought we were just the best of friends, but it was so much more than what a typical friendship was. Like, there was this like sexual desire for them, but I wasn't facing it until I met someone at my second job in high school. I was working at Barnes & Noble. I met this girl and I was like, whoa, like there's no way that I can like have rose-colored glasses or pretend anything anymore. Like I want to have sex with this person. And so I didn't come to terms with bisexuality until then. And then having friends who were trans and having friends who were asexual, it was as I interacted with them that I was like, oh, that's a variation. Oh, this is a variation. I've been very close. I always identified as very close to the LGBTQ community. I thought of myself as an ally for a long time until I realized, oh, hey, I'm a part of this. So I don't think I had,
Gal.
yeah, I don't think I had any strong opinions as to what wasn't sex, but my knowledge just, I was willing to include things as they came by. I think I just wasn't aware of stuff and was like, oh, cool, that works. Oh, cool, that works. But there was never a, this is the way, the truth, and the light.
So I'm very connected to the argument of what isn't sex, just due to the really conservative background that we were raised in. There was shame being thrown at me because I had gone, in quotes, all the way. Whereas the girls throwing shame at me had just gone as far as oral.
Oh, right.
And
That is frustrating.
it's really frustrating. And I just want to kind of unpack this whole... I feel like as an adult woman, oral sex is sex.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
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 Now, where I think it gets a little complicated is when does foreplay turn into sex? And does anyone have an answer to that?
Intent.
Okay.
And when it's in intent.
Tension.
Yeah, that's I've never thought of that. Intent is a big one. I mean, I think to some extent, like when your clothes come off, I suppose. Because when I think of foreplay, I think of like pre-disrobing. I'm sure now I'm gonna like have a memory of totally proving myself wrong with that one.
No, I kind of agree. I think like maybe there's an argument of like, is foreplay also sex? Like, I don't know. I guess it's also an argument of like, what is foreplay? You know, like I kind of can agree that, you know, I see foreplay as something that your clothes aren't necessarily off. Maybe clothes are coming off. And I would definitely say that clothes, like taking your clothes off, is an act of foreplay. I mean, that could be
Yes.
super hot.
Yes, for sure.
But yeah, I think intention is funny because I guess as a gay man, I come into it with, you know, knowing what my options are. So for me, I see like intent. I have an intent. If I want to have sex with a person, I have an intent that I want to be sexual with that person. And to me, it kind of stops at that, and I try not to think about like, oh, well, does that mean it's going to be a blowjob or is it going to be anal sex? So, yeah, I think, yeah, intent is a very interesting and a very good way to describe it or think about it.
Yeah.
But to me, I think I have an intent of wanting to be sexual. And
Yeah.
that can come in many different ways.
I think also part of the foreplay is like teasing the idea of sex, whether or not it happens, or whether or not it happens like that day. But it's like presenting the idea is a big part of it.
My favorite thing about sex is the connection to another person, whether it's spiritual or whether it is purely physical. Because I do think that there's degrees in sexual interactions with another person where sometimes it's a little bit more animalistic, sometimes it's a little bit more loving. But that magnetic connection between two people, I think there is a transition between foreplay and sexual interaction when that connection officially binds. And that's when it becomes sex for me. And it's a shame that that's my defining moment because it's really hard to explain if you've never felt it.
I think the bridge here is, and this is also how I think about it because Being bisexual, I have different ideas of like what sex is with men and what sex is with women, right? And intent is like the number one thing that I go to, but I think I define it that way because it's the level of vulnerability that I'm sharing with a person. And for some reason in my brain, oral sex with men is less vulnerable, it's less vulnerable than oral sex with women. And so it's a very psychological question as to what level of vulnerability I'm sharing and what that means in that situation.
Mm.
Colin, you've been a little quiet through this. Do you have a take on it?
Oh no, I'm just. It seems like the conversation's been fine without me.
Colin's
what this part of the conversation has really made me think about is like, since we're talking about what is sex and what is virginity, like how much of losing your virginity is your intent to lose it or your intent to have lost it. Like when I'm thinking about me, if I were to go by the definition of sex that I have now, I lost my virginity like months before I thought I lost it back then, but I wasn't ready to admit that to myself, and I wasn't ready to make that next step. So that's the question that I find really interesting, is like how much of that is just, I mean, how much is virginity just a purely mental construct, something that you have to decide, like, this is a barrier that I have broken, and it's done now. I declare it. I declare non-virginity.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Colin. Like, I mean, same guy, different time frame. If we go off of how I define sex now, it happened much before when penetrative sex happened for me.
Yeah. Mm.
But nowadays, like, I think another thing that and again, it's totally personal, but how I define sex is if you were to cheat on me, how pissed I would be. Like, ultimately, if you made out with someone else, whatever, we'll get over it. Like, you're sitting on the couch, but who cares?
Think it would be whatever, but...
She's giving you a go-ahead.
No, she is not. She would be very mad.
But like,
we would get through it.
If you went down on another woman, that's like a whole new
that is
level.
sex.
I think there's maybe an argument that there's sex, but then there's different levels of sex or intensity of sex.
Okay, so from my perspective, I lost my virginity to somebody that I didn't really care about. As Colin said, I was out to lose it. I was like, I'm done with it. I want to be over it. Like, everyone's always thought of me as a really sexual person. Why do I still have this thing? I just want to be having sex. So that I lost my virginity to somebody that I didn't have a very strong emotional relationship, blah, 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 blah. And then later, I started having sex with somebody that I was in love with. And that was like losing a completely different virginity. And it was, again, because of vulnerability to me. So I find it interesting that we can go back and be like, oh, I lost it way earlier than I thought I did. Whereas for me, there was like a huge awakening way after when I thought I did.
That's interesting. I had sort of the opposite. I had the same experience, but like in the opposite way. So the first time I had sex, it was with someone that I was in love with, and it was like very intentional and intense. And then I felt like I lost another level of virginity, like my first one-night stand. Like, just to, like, to have sex just to do it.
I go back and I think about the history of my sexuality. I think virginity is layered. I think there is technically the first time you do a thing, and then there's the first time you think you're in love with someone, and like the first time you're actually in love with someone, or I don't know, the very intensities of feelings you feel for other people. And I think that kind of, looking back on it, how that affects your sexuality is really interesting. And then I'm on Zoe's side. Like, the first time I had sex to like just have sex was losing a different part of me, or maybe not losing, but awakening a different part, and then realizing that Colin was going to be the person who I wanted to be with forever and for always, was losing a different type of virginity.
Yeah.
Cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do think you lose your virginity in multiple ways as you grow older.
Yeah. I mean, I think also aspects of it, like, without becoming too morbid, like, before I quote unquote lost my virginity, like, were taken from me, like, that I didn't have the option to, like, lose or discard on my own. And I think a lot of that is just growing up as a girl.
Yeah.
Like, those things happen. So I also don't know, there are things that happened that I'm like, did I lose my virginity in the sense of losing my innocence, like, long before that? And then that obviously brings up the question, like, what is virginity? Is it the actual hymen, which, like, I don't think I had to begin with, because, like, I have no memory of that actually,
Yeah.
like, you know, breaking
Same.
or whatever. There was no, like, virginal wedding day sheets or whatever.
Ew.
Yeah, I guess, is virginity an actual physical thing, or is it like a translation error when the Bible was translated from whatever it was in originally? I think they may have just meant that Mary was a really nice girl. Like, she was very pure and very lovely, and everyone liked her, and period, end of sentence. And somehow that just has gotten away from us. I don't know.
Well, Sherry, do you think something shifted in you when you started having sex?
Yeah, definitely, but I think it had more with the fact to do that, it was a realization that I was in a guise. It wasn't necessarily, I mean, yeah, like, having sex made me feel like I this is definitely a societal pressure, and it's unfortunate, but it did make me feel like I was, like, now part of the group, like, part of, like, this group that you're supposed to get into eventually. So that's how I felt. But I think to go back to the whole idea of, like, losing different kinds of virginity, I definitely agree with. The one night stand losing virginity versus, like, the passionate, oh, I love this person kind of losing your virginity is very different. But I also wanted to go back to this idea of innocence versus virginity, because I personally think that they are different. I think losing your innocence involves a lot of things where virginity is just part of that whole losing your innocence.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's more important to think about losing your innocence versus your virginity, but I think they are different in that sense. Definitely losing your virginity plays a part in it, but I just keep thinking about some people that I've met that, this might be very cliche and stereotypical, but I know for a fact that they're not a virgin, but they're, like, into Disney and I'm looking at Megan and Colin, and they hate talking about sex, so that's already different from Megan and Colin. Like, but, like, they like get so shy talking about it, even though they are, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking about a more, like, conservative Christian person that's suburban, maybe, that feels really innocent to me, like very green in life, but they lost their virginity.
Yeah, like, this idea of having sex doesn't necessarily make you comfortable with sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally,
Oh, definitely.
exactly.
Yeah.
Just because you've had sex doesn't mean that you're actually so comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely has to do with, like, societal reasons.
Oh, yeah.
There was a difference, like, in the first time I slept with a man, which was also a one night stand, and that was, you know, did it to do it, and that was that. But like, there was a sense of oh, now in a lot of people's minds, I have actually lost my virginity.
Right.
Which is not how I felt at all, but I was like aware that other people might think that.
Yeah.
Which was, you know, a whole other issue.
I knew a ton of kids growing up. I say kids, I mean teenagers, who would follow the everything but approach.
Oh, right.
Are they just completely missing the point?
Yes.
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, for me, because I did grow up with because I grew up in a very conservative town, I'm pretty sure I know exactly what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, it's not vaginal sex, it's anal sex, so we could do that, or it's oral sex, and that doesn't count. And I think that's purely because there's a book, the Bible, that says, this is sex, and anything else is not sex. So they're like, oh, well, I mean, I'm technically still following the rules. But for us, or at least for us, I would say, we would not agree with that. I feel like we have a more intimate view of that. Oh gosh, my mother's calling me.
She knows, Jerry.
I'll have to call her back.
I agree, but also I disagree because everything is fluid. My counter argument is we were just talking about how intent and vulnerability is a big factor as to whether or not they're losing their virginity. So I think the question is, if there are kids who are being emotionally vulnerable and doing anything but, yeah, I think they might be missing the point. If you're doing the sex act for the sex act and you're not releasing that vulnerability or that relationship between two partners, then I think that they're still not, like, they still will have a virginity. Again, it all comes back to these different levels of virginity.
I've heard some interesting configurations of the everything but approach. I think a lot of people subscribe to the oral isn't, hand stuff isn't, and the anal isn't, I think, is an interesting one, but some people do describe to it.
Well, the anal isn't sex thing is confusing to me because that is so contingent on the fact that virginity means taking something from a woman. Because for a man, that's not really very much different. But for a woman, it's like your hymen isn't being broken. So it's like not sex.
Well, let's unpack that statement. Colin, previously you and I have gotten into discussions about the concept of virginity as ownership.
It comes back to the idea that sex is something that a man does to a woman, and that you want, if you view a marriage contract as like essentially a contract between two men, woman's father and her future husband, and you're just transferring property, the woman, from one man to another, then you want the woman to be a virgin, so you know that you're getting unspoiled goods. I mean, that's the crass term. That's a crass term to use, but it's how marriage and women have been viewed for a long time and are still viewed all around the world today. So, is that making sense? I sort of lost my train of thought.
That makes sense. So, like, how do we feel about that concept that your virginity is someone else's to own?
Ooh.
I have personally never thought of mine as belonging to someone else. But I mean, I know a lot of people who do feel that way, whether or not it's conscious or they want to or whatever. I think it's a very common thing.
It's even in the way that we phrase it. I lost my virginity to blank.
Right.
Like you're giving it to someone.
And just to chime in, like, I remember in high school and college, you would hear someone say, so-and-so has someone else's V card all the time. Like that,
Yeah.
their virginity was something that they got to keep.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it more as like, I lent this to you.
I let you borrow it.
But like different people have certainly like checked it out of the library since then. Like it doesn't belong to any specific person. And the idea of it previously having belonged to one's father like skeeves me out a lot.
It's the whole symbolism of having dead walk you down the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's why I think that is so gross.
Purity culture is huge in evangelical Christianity.
Yeah.
Where you have people wearing promise rings, and you have these like sort of creepy dad-daughter dances, and
right. At least with this group, we can see why that's more of a close-minded, I would even say like poisonous way of thinking, because that only gives you, like basically only like straight people can really join in on it. We know that there's so much more, like Marcella said, fluidity in sexuality and gender identity, and so to kind of have these very strict rules that we know only certain people can abide by is very limiting and very detrimental to like the overall society.
Can I play devil's advocate for a second?
Yeah.
There are Christians out there who believe in saving their virginity for someone special, and I kind of see the value in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's fine. But to me, it's like when those beliefs or ideals start being imposed on other people, that starts to become close-minded, and then I think dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I am fully supportive of a human being that wants to save themselves for marriage, because there's the sense of their identity, their ownership of their sexuality.
Right.
And I think the criticism here is male ownership, even within Christian families, of that virginity. And does that difference make sense? Like, if you choose that for yourself, yes, right. If you're doing it to live up to the expectations of someone else, I would say
your father specifically.
Especially the father in this situation. Question that.
So
do it for you.
Here's my next devil's advocate question. How many people out there, so I think I read a statistic once, it's either 90 or 98% of Americans have sex before they get married. How many people who are saving themselves for marriage, how many do we think it was 100% their choice? It wasn't something that they were more or less raised to believe that there is only one option.
Ooh, I want to say like 0.
Oh, no. I mean, I think there are genuine, like Marcella was saying, I think there is, it's totally fine to want to save yourself, but it has to be for yourself.
I know a girl that we went to church with that was saving her first kiss for her marriage day.
Ooh, okay. I don't want to dox anybody. I do remember a couple people like that.
So the reason I bring up that I went to church with them was because it's not like we were being pressured to believe that. Like, no one was telling her to do that.
Mm-hmm.
She had an older sibling, and they weren't coming at it with that perspective, and they didn't feel like that was pressured on them either. But to her, it was really important to her. And you know what? That's not something that I could ever identify with. But if that means something to you, then I absolutely understand. I think that it's awesome that somebody valued their virginity in every sense of the term to that level. I can personally admit that I regret the way that I lost my sexual virginity. And I regretted it immediately afterwards because I didn't put enough value in it. I fell into the trick of it. So I don't want this to sound like I am telling everybody out there, like, yo, lose it right now. That's not it.
So I was actually at a house party like 4 years ago or something like this. This was back in Salt Lake. I was visiting Colin, and I remember being so disgusted. There was this girl who was gossiping behind her friend's back. I also knew this friend, and she was basically going on this rant about how her friend should just lose her virginity already. She's like, your first time sucks anyway, and once you get it over with, it's not a big deal. And she just kept going and going and going on this rant, and I was angry for the friend, because A, it's no one but her's business.
Yeah.
B, yeah, no one's gonna say my first time was my best time. Said no one. Right?
Yeah.
And C, like, yeah, once Marcella, do you remember back in high school I told you, in terms of losing your virginity, once you pop, the fun don't stop?
Wow.
Like,
no, but I have a terrible memory and I regret not remembering it.
Yeah, I certainly will never forget hearing you say that.
I think when it comes to terms of losing your virginity, whether it should be a big deal or not, it is. And
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I think no one should dictate when you're ready other than yourself. And probably, you need a consenting partner. So the one that you're engaging in this experience has a say to a certain extent, to the extent that they need to consent to the sexual act, but they should not be pressuring you to do it.
Right.
My partner didn't know.
Ooh, what's our take on that?
Yeah. Yeah. I 100%, I can admit I did this wrong. But yeah, no, I lost my virginity to somebody that I didn't have an emotional relationship with. He had no idea. But I validated myself being like, I'm an adult. I'm in college now. I am choosing to lose this. I don't like the pressure of it. I just want it to be gone. And so, yeah, I hooked up with someone. They had no idea it was my virginity. I immediately had a lot of Christian guilt over it, as well as like this regret of not having shared it with somebody special. And I dumped him so fast, like immediately after him, like never went on another date with him again.
Yikes.
Wow.
I think that's super messed up. If you don't feel like you can talk to the person about it being your virginity, I don't think that that's the person you should be doing it with.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is something said. It's corny, and I'm sure there's a lot of youths out there who don't want to listen to this, but I think there is something to be said about waiting to have your first time with someone who means something to you, because I've heard so many stories, and typically, not always, but typically it's from women who really regret their first time because they just wanted their virginity out of the way. It's a very common story to hear. And I feel really lucky. Like, ultimately, the guy I lost my virginity to, we broke up. It was not a great breakup story. We haven't spoken in 10 years, but I really, really cared about him. And he really, really cared about me. And I have no regrets. Like, if I was to go back and do it all, I'd do it the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think as a gay man who is in the gay male community, I have also encountered many friends that have lost it for that same pressure reason, and I haven't really met anyone that has said like, oh, I completely don't regret it, or I don't feel some sort of regret for losing it towards just a rando. I think those people that I've talked to have always said, oh, I do wish that it was a little bit more important. And it's unfortunate that there's that pressure, because I think it's a societal pressure, and it goes back to what Megan was saying, that party that you were talking about of like, oh yeah, you just need to lose it, hurry up and lose it. That's, I think, a pressure that society places on us, and I think if that wasn't there, we would be able to more freely and less guiltily, I guess, think about losing our virginity when we truly feel like we need to lose it. Because I also felt that pressure, especially like in terms of age. Like, oh my God, you're 20 or 21, you still haven't lost it. Oh, that's so crazy. And there really shouldn't be that kind of pressure. And I hope that as a society we're moving away from that. 'Cause it's very superfluous to me.
I would love to hear. It's interesting that you brought up age because I didn't think about that. My pressure was definitely stemming from my rebellion against religion. So I think that's why I was just like, I've always wanted to have sex. I never wanted to get married. These things were never supposed to be associated. I just want to be over it. A lot of that came from my, the issues that I was having with my church and my belief in religion. So, okay, so there's that. Age, I hadn't thought about, but yeah, age is absolutely a contributing factor. Are there other pressures that we think people feel that drives them to make a decision that otherwise, hopefully, they wouldn't make?
I think part of it is like if someone's been in a relationship with someone for so long and they still don't feel ready, I think there's a kind of pressure there to like, you know, why haven't you had sex yet?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a normality pressure. I had a whole talking segment to talk about media and how media shapes how we define sex and virginity. If you watch any movie from the 80s, the virgin is always seen as a loser. With the exception of horror films where the virgin is seen as the one who lives. But
The only one worthy.
yeah.
I was gonna counter that and say that it's only a loser. The virgin is only a loser if they're a man. Like, women can be virgins, but men
I feel like I've
can't.
seen movies where like women are also portrayed as like losers if they're a virgin.
Okay.
Yeah, like we just watched 16 Candles. By the way, that movie is canceled, and we can go into why later.
It is very canceled.
But
I
I mean,
have not
Molly
seen it.
Ringwald is kind of shown to be a loser.
No, she's the protagonist.
But-
She's cool. She's the hero of the story. It's
But
the rapey nerd who's the loser.
But it's to us. But like to the storyline, like she's kind of seen as this outsider, and she feels a lot of shame about her virginity.
Okay.
What's
true.
the name of that one movie that it's like this girl, Heath Ledger's in it. This girl who gets made
She's All
over.
That?
10 Things I Hate About You.
I think
No.
so. Wasn't she also portrayed as like a loser until she like got with a guy? And maybe there wasn't like
No,
a
he's thinking
direct-
of Freddie Prinze Jr. movie.
Oh, the Freddie Prinze Jr. Yes, that one.
That's the one he's thinking of.
Is
Yeah.
that She's All That?
I thought that's
Yeah,
what
I think it is.
Yeah.
She's All That. I mean, to me, that's what I was thinking of.
Sorry, what, Zoe?
We can't forget about Grease.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah, she does become cool. Okay, never mind.
yeah. There you go.
Yeah, she sings
Those
a
are
whole
all good
song about it.
examples.
I'll spare you.
So I love anything with John Lithgow in it, and so I've been watching Third Rock from the Sun again, and there is an entire episode where Sally talks about her virginity, and I think she nails it on the head where she's like, "It's something I am simultaneously proud and ashamed of."
Yeah, I hate the shame around it. There's no way to win in society.
No.
No, especially
Especially as a woman.
Yeah,
I
especially
think
as
it's
a woman.
even harder.
Yeah,
You're either the slut or the virgin. Like, there's nothing in between for you.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's boring.
I want to circle back to Marcella. This is not me shaming you at all, but not telling your partner that it was your first time.
Yeah.
I can-
I wanted to bring that up because I feel bad. He still doesn't know. I haven't talked to him in years.
Oh God, do you think he's ever going to listen to this?
God, I hope not. We are Facebook friends. I don't think I've given enough details away.
Yeah.
We're not doxing him.
Do we think there is responsibility to kind of, when it is your first time, to let the other person know or not?
I think that the reason people don't is the stigma. So
Yeah.
if we get rid of, if we can work on getting rid of the stigma, it wouldn't be as big a deal. to tell someone. It should always, I agree with Megan, it should always be a big deal to get rid of your virginity, or to lose your virginity.
Get rid
to
of it,
give
girl.
someone your virginity.
Throw it out.
Whatever the right way of saying this is, and not being the utter douchebag that I am. Because that's the thing. Like, I think that the person I chose was a good human. He really was. Like, he was a very sweet person. He was very shocked at the way that I was like, yeah, no, turns out this isn't going to work out. Okay, bye. Like, he really wanted to, like, talk about things and, like, see what had gone wrong. And, like, he was such a good person that I think if I had told him what I was doing, he would have been like, whoa, hey, like, I want to bone you and all, but let's think about this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, again, if you're going to do it, it should be with somebody you're comfortable telling.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Let's segue into what advice do we have for someone who's ready to lose their virginity?
Oh, jeez.
Oh, I don't feel qualified.
Yeah, I was just about to say that too. I don't feel qualified to answer this question. But I mean, I guess, like, seek guidance from people that you trust, that you know, like, have your best interest in mind and aren't necessarily going to, like, try to indoctrinate you. Like, so people who you see the way that they live their life and the way that their life is gone, and you think, like, that's what I want. Like, ask those people, not like the people whose approval you think you should be getting.
Nice.
Yeah. God, I'm not qualified either. I think we may not feel like we're qualified because it goes back to this idea of, like, everyone has a different view of what virginity is. And I think that is, could be background, the way you were raised, could be a lot of things. But I think I would say is, first and foremost, really try and look at yourself. And I think this would help, like Zoe was saying, to, get the guidance of other people. But really look at yourself and tell yourself or ask yourself, like, what is really important to me in terms of this topic? Am I wanting to wait because of the way I was raised, or a certain institution is telling me to do it a certain way? Or do I really care about waiting for marriage or waiting for the right person? Whatever that may be, I think it's important to firstly figure out what's important to you, and make sure that you're doing it for yourself. And then from there, evaluate, like, okay, where am I now? If I feel like I want to wait for the person to be the right one and not necessarily wait until marriage, then do I have that person right now? If not, then it's probably best to wait. But I think, yeah, that answer is going to be different levels. It's going to gauge according to what that person believes.
I love, Jerry, the flow chart that you just explained. Like, if ask the question, yes or no, like, just take that the next level and really get into the psychological reason why you're ready or willing to do something. If I were to speak to any Marcellas out there, look, sex can be fun and emotionless, and it can be the act. Absolutely, it can. Sex can be this the cheesy thing that people say about this, like, complete molding of two people who are in love, and it's a spiritual experience. It can be that as well. Even if you aren't a mushy gushy person like I wasn't, and still kind of am not, Even if you think sex is an act and it is for fun, and you want to lose your virginity for fun, I caution you to think of the fact that you will always remember this moment in your life. You will always be remembering this person that you've chosen. So don't lose your virginity for any pressures. Don't lose your virginity. Don't keep your virginity for any pressures. Figure out, what are you going to be happy with living with for the rest of your life? What story is right for you? Because that is the thing that I look back on the most, is not giving weight to something because I thought everybody telling me that it was this metaphysical moment was giving me lovey-dovey bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It is special.
I mean, it is in many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also if you do have an experience like the one you had, Marcella, afterwards, you don't have to shame yourself about it.
Absolutely.
Like, that's another big thing, is to be like, it might suck, or it might be weird, or you might, do something you wish you didn't. And the only thing you can do is like have compassion for yourself and just continue to have better and better experiences. So I think that's a big thing too.
And I think it's important to remember that we discussed this theory of multi-layered virginity.
Chances are it probably is not going to be great. I mean...
Yeah.
Yeah. Chances are it's not
I'm not saying
the
it's
best.
going to suck, but I mean, a lot of it is about, skill set, like experience.
Yeah.
There's a lot to learn.
Yeah, and there is a lot to learn, but yeah, that doesn't mean it's going to be any less special.
I think every person remembers the first time they had sex and the first time they had good sex. I remember the first time I orgasmed. It was not my first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, me neither. It's okay to go in informed about your own anatomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I wish had been recommended to me before I lost my virginity. I would like to recommend to all the ladies out there that try masturbating first, because if you don't know how to pleasure yourself, how are you supposed to expect another person to do it for you?
Mm-hmm. The first time I ever successfully, I guess, I suppose I was masturbating, but like not.
I'm so intrigued.
No. No, I mean, I kind of didn't really know what I was doing. Like, it wasn't necessarily an intentional, like, this is the outcome. But I was on a family vacation, and I was not alone in the room. So that is my, like, if we're talking about funny experiences, like accidentally discovering my anatomy in a room with like my sleeping extended family. Yeah, so I mean, I suggest like figuring it out when you're a little more alone.
Yeah. Oh my god. Was that like Mission Impossible for you? Like trying to stay super quiet? Or
It sure as fuck was. Yeah. I mean, I was shocked. Like, that could happen. Mind was blown.
Yeah. I have a fun advice, and then I have a funny story. Should I say?
Yeah, go for it.
Both. All.
I mean, in terms of, okay, yeah, sex is definitely fun. It definitely can be fun. I mean, for me and my partner, we do like to invite other people for threesomes. Haven't had foursomes yet, but we are open to that.
Are you looking on this podcast?
If you're in the long
I've been
chair,
staring at Colin and Megan this whole time. Like, hey, what's up, guys? What are you guys doing after this? But yeah, no, I think
Just please turn your camera off.
Oh, yeah. I mean, or do you want it on? No.
Well, that's a Patreon bonus.
Watch her join, Zoe. Watch her join.
Yeah, my girlfriend's coming over, so.
Get that popcorn. But yeah, I think inviting different people, and I think that goes to my next advice, which is be okay with experimenting. It goes, again, consent is reversible, so don't be afraid to be like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be fully into this. Try it out.
Yeah.
Of course, in a perfect world, consent will always be reversible, so you know that you can always back out if you want to. In terms of the funny story, me and Jake went to Denver one year, and we're, out on the prowl looking for another person to have fun with both of us, and we found someone, and let's just say, just be ready for anything. Don't come in with preconceived notions of what your, I guess I'm going to say, positions are going to be. So just be prepared to be in any position, because the worst thing that could happen, or one of the really embarrassing things that could happen, is a little, like a little number 2 oopsie.
Yeah.
So would you recommend some fiber?
Yeah, maybe have a salad, maybe not eat right afterward. I don't know. You get your bowel movements. People know their bowel movements the most, So you know what you got to do. But yeah, just make sure that you're ready, because me and my partner were definitely not ready for that, and anything. Basically, the story is, one of us pooped. I'm trying to be all sneaky, but you know what? One of us pooped a little bit, and it was embarrassing. Doesn't matter who. But the cool thing was that there was no judgment. We were like, oh, so good, let's just clean it up real quick, and, went back at it.
That's where poop comes from.
Yeah.
It's bound to happen.
Yeah.
Mr. Colin.
Yeah. No.
No.
I mean, listen, I've never
Hard
had
pass.
any problems with sex. I was good at it immediately as soon as I tried it. And so,
You made every single woman orgasm.
in the whole world.
All one of her.
All one of her.
Oh, one of her.
Colin was very Jesus
I was
for a
very
very long
Jesus
time.
for
Oh,
a
wow.
long time. And I thought I was going to save myself for marriage. And in a way, I kind of did.
Yeah, you did. You made it.
Because I had sex with a lady for the first time, and then I got married to that lady like 7 years later.
Yeah, he
Oh.
did.
So technically.
So I'm technically still good.
Yeah. Let us know what heaven is like. We'll be here.
Must be nice.
Okay. No, I don't know if I have any advice to give that we haven't before. One thing that I like to talk about during the consent episode was that no means no, of course, but also yes means yes. So you don't be afraid to say yes to the things that you do want to do. Like that's kind of what I regret from being a teenager and a young person, is times when I wanted to have sex with someone but didn't know how to communicate that, or was so wrapped up in my own shame that I couldn't make it happen. And so I would just recommend people take some of the pressure off of themselves. Like, yes, your first time is important, but also you have like how many hundreds of times after that to make up for it?
Thousands.
Like, thousands of times.
Yeah,
Hopefully. And so just take a little bit of the pressure off of yourself and just analyze your motivations. Say, why do I want to do this? And what do I want to do and why do I want to do it? And then do it. Feel free to say yes.
One more little interjection. This whole having sex on your wedding night thing for the first time, if I had just thrown a wedding, I would want to go straight to sleep. That blows my mind.
Yeah. Where do people find the energy?
I mean, honestly, a wedding is super exhausting.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure going into it, and I mean, there is something to be said about having sex and being like, we just got married, right? Like, there is something kind of special
It's
about
nice.
it. But honestly, I don't know, Colin. Do you think that was one of our top 10?
No, definitely not.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Cute. Yes. No, wait. I want to jump on this. If you're somebody that's saving yourself for marriage and you haven't ran the bases ahead of time, like you've decided that you wanted to be a certain level of pure for your wedding night, I don't think that I think that, because I am so unexperienced with this whole idea, I just would like to say, like, please, I hope that you feel comfortable telling your partner, hey, why don't we ease into it? You don't have to lose your virginity on your wedding night.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I always think about like
absolutely.
that pressure, like that would freak me out.
Going from 0 to 60, there shouldn't be that pressure there.
Yeah.
If you have very little sexual experience, yeah, feel free to be like, hey, let's spend the time going through this journey, the sexual discovery, like other people do.
And I would recommend that. Like, sex is better
Yes.
when you take the time to prime the engine, if you were.
Yeah, ramp up. You gotta
Yeah.
ramp up there.
Go for it.
Any
kids.
truths you need to preach?
Sexuality is fluid, just like gender is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, having us.
Please follow us on social media. Please hit like on our posts. It makes us feel good.
It validates our little
And
existence.
please leave us a review. We love getting reviews. It makes us so happy.
If you leave a review, I want you to screenshot that bad boy once you've posted it. I want you to send me that screenshot to remedialsexed@gmail.com, and in return, I will write you a up to 400-word poem on a topic of your choosing. So send the topic along with the screenshot, and I will send you, dear listener, a personalized poem. It can be a sonnet, sestina, lyric, limerick, no limericks, but whatever you want. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be
Very
it's gonna be
prejudiced
huge.
towards poetry, Colin.
No, limericks are out.
No limericks.
But yeah, that is our little. That's gonna be our review gimmick. Okay, that's gonna be my review gimmick. I don't want to speak for everybody, but everybody's gotta have a gimmick. So,
All right.
smash that like button.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Megan.
I'm Marcella.
And I'm Colin.
And we also have Jerry and Zoe.
Yay!
Yay!
Thanks for joining us.
You will agree that the concepts will contribute to the rearing of a mature person.
An absence of
Oh, yeah, you don't have to be thinking about sex.